All right, we're here in L.A. radio studio. The final broadcast, air quotes.
Air quotes, final broadcast.
Gonzo Greg is here in the studio.
I didn't do it.
Ted Pritchard, Thrash Pie is
Thank
here.
you.
And we're joined by a couple of radio
Legends.
Legendary Phil.
well, see, I'm beside myself. I don't often get to sit with people who are even loftier than Gonzo and Thrasher.
I would say, who's that guy next to you?
I was total fanboying on both of these
That
people.
voice right there is Geno Michellini, who, when I got started in broadcast radio on a commercial level, where actually somebody was willing to pay me a check, Geno was the morning man at 95.5 KLOS. Did you use the point at the time, or was it just 95.5?
No, I didn't do mornings. I did afternoons.
You were at afternoon?
I did afternoons.
Who was the guy in the
15 years.
Fraser Smith was in the morning.
And Frase was there before me.
Oh, and then you were the afternoon.
When I joined, Shauna did mornings.
Oh.
She was doing mornings.
Back when the records were all in a little box on 3x5 cards, and you guys got to flip through the cards and decide which song to
And
play.
we complained about that.
You actually played records, though. That was the other thing. There was actually records playing on the radio.
And also in the studio with us.
Vinyl, what's that?
Right?
Back when I used to listen to KROQ AM in my '63 Corvair because I didn't have FM in the Los Angeles area, it was just a spectacular radio station that was born from something that was even better. Back when I was 9 years old, started listening to underground FM, freeform radio, and KPPC, Pasadena Presbyterian Church.
Right.
The insane Darrell Wayne is here.
The insane Darrell Wayne is here right now, everybody.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And my goodness, all the just radio magic that I listened to with you on the air over the years.
Well, things sort of unfolded, you know. I mean, we told stories with the records. We told stories on the air. And, you know, everything had to have a beginning and a middle and an end.
Doesn't it make sense that with today's millennials, that if radio...
Why are we all laughing?
We need to do this. We need to go there.
If radio had personalities who could tell stories, because millennials...
They're not allowed to anymore.
They're not listening,
but
by
they're
the way,
listening
also.
to podcasts with storytellers. So why not tell the stories on the radio and
Because
play
you're not allowed
music?
to.
Right. Yeah,
You're not allowed to.
Right. Well, they're
Well, I know
jumping
that
over
there's
$1 to grab a nickel.
Yeah, there's several radio stations in L.A. that have a 30-second rule. That's the longest you
That's
can
right.
speak,
And between that and voice tracking, half the stations aren't even live.
Yeah.
It's just the voices mixed with the computer music.
Well, voice tracking is a tool, you know, and you can use that tool to whatever extent necessary.
Sure.
I mean, you can record a 15-minute voice track and tell a story.
I have a friend who works for one of the satellite networks, one of the big ones.
Yeah.
And she got called into her program director's office and criticized because her break was 3 seconds too long.
Oh, 3 seconds.
3 seconds.
Well, they could sell that, can't they? Well, it adds up, too.
Yeah, well, it were better when the lunatics were running the assignment.
Yes,
agreed.
I absolutely agree.
Well,
Yeah, we're
now, another perspective, I lecture at university, and I talk to students about broadcasting and podcasting and various things related to radio, which they are not all that familiar with. And back when you were allowed to tell a story, it was romantic, and that convinced me, unfortunately, to get into this business. Today, there isn't any romance that's luring people into an industry that really doesn't have a soul, in my opinion. And so, my goodness, wouldn't it be nice to find a station during a fire sale after one of these companies comes out of bankruptcy?
There's one reason for that, why that won't happen. It's called deregulation.
Yeah, well...
You've got 5 companies that own everything.
Right, with shares of stock that sell for 15 cents.
There you go.
Yeah.
That's
Well, they're
it.
going to have to start spinning off some of those things, and there will be probably some opportunities. But,
Yeah.
As Geno had mentioned, I worked with both of Shauna and Frasier
Yes.
at KROQ before they got over to KLOS.
Right, yeah.
And Frasier obviously was under some more control at KLOS than he was at KROQ. He
little bit.
He probably didn't.
Just a little.
Just a tad.
At KLOS, he probably didn't break any furniture like he did at KROQ.
Oh, my goodness.
And Shauna actually was the one where when the shackles were off, she was uncomfortable at KROQ.
Right.
No kidding.
Because she came from KFRC and KHJ, and she was used to the fences the Top 40 Radio had built for her.
Okay, I mentioned earlier about the inspiration to get into radio. I grew up on people like B. Mitchell Reed,
Sure, yeah,
Shadow Stevens, going way back to the old KMET. They were my inspiration to get on the radio.
Outrageous Nevada,
and I had
the rabbit.
Had the honor of having Michael Hunter as my program director when I was in the Bay Area. And what's interesting is all of the things he taught me that I used as tools to be successful, and I was very successful, are no longer allowed on the radio.
Right. Yeah.
It's as simple as that. I mean, he used to say, I don't want you talking at your audience. Talk to them.
Yeah, with them.
Get off a soapbox.
Right.
If I hear you on a soapbox, you're fired.
Yeah.
And mess with their minds.
Mm-hmm.
We loved theater of the mind.
Sure.
Yep.
Screw with them.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's not allowed anymore.
No.
Jimmy Rabbit had about 3 stints at KROQ while I was there.
One of my heroes.
Yeah.
And I brought him back when I was program director, and he came out on a Wednesday night at 6 p.m., and he said, well, Rabbit's back on the air, KROQ. He says, all you promo people that are listening, it's Snowola, man. He says, just bring down the cocaine, I'll play anything.
I remember one night I was driving home from broadcasting school, and I just got out in the Air Force, and I was going to broadcasting school in Hollywood, and I had Rabbit on. And he was one of those ones that I wanted to be as cool as he was. I mean, he didn't do jokes and bits. He was just cool.
Yeah, he says, I don't care what kind of record, rhythm and blues, country, doesn't matter to me. I'll play anything. Just bring down the blow, and I'll put a record on.
I'm driving home on the Ventura Freeway one night about 10 o'clock, and he comes on and he says, I apologize for that smell coming out of your speakers, but I'm out of incense, so I'm burning cigarette filters.
Yeah, right.
I almost drove off the road.
Could you work that smooth after a quarter wild turkey?
Yeah. And
Oh, God, yeah. Or the night that he locked the door and kept playing his band over and over and over again. Wouldn't let the program director in the studio.
awesome.
You can't do that anymore.
the GM was in the back room, and he called me in. He said, tell Rabbit not to talk about cocaine on the radio anymore.
Yeah.
And I said, Pat, I think that's a bad idea.
I remember it was him and remember Lee Baby Sims?
Of course.
I mean,
And so I went in and I reached over his shoulder. I say, Rabbit, Pat doesn't want to talk about cocaine on the air anymore. Rabbit said, okay. Yeah. And I knew we were in trouble.
Should we reset
So-
real quick?
Oh, yeah. You want to your turn, Gonzo? Go ahead and reset.
Hey, radio guys, let's reset from the L.A. Hey, Mike Starks, stand up in the control room over there.
Congratulations.
And thanks for having us all here at L.A. Radio Studio. Hashtag LARadiostudio.com, celebrating the work that we've done here and the people that have been here and the people that we're talking to right now. We are admittedly in the depths of a super radio geek deep dive right now.
Very deep.
But if you know any of these guys, if you listen to LA radio back in the day, I am totally fanboying right now because two of my favorite people, two of my favorite personalities that I listen to on the radio are here, and I'm hanging out with them in this
Awesome
room.
day.
In this room.
So what's it?
So Rabbit went off.
Yeah,
but I mean, he went nuts.
Yeah.
He said, Pat,
Because you did tell him to stop, right?
Yeah, Pat, the general manager, told me not to talk about cocaine on the radio anymore. And he said, we have found the missing link. Leakey was right. This guy is a monkey. He's an ape. He looks, he's got big ears like a car with the doors wide open. And he's got no soul, no personality. He doesn't know anything about radio, and he's in charge. I don't understand it. Well,
That's the way it's done. Isn't
that
it?
was his last day.
That was it.
He started on Wednesday and ended on Wednesday.
Yeah, pretty much.
And these were my heroes. These are I heard these people, and they're the reason I wanted to get into FM radio.
Well,
I want to be like that.
Yeah,
Darrell, you hired him, and you didn't have a consultant to blame it on.
Right?
No. Our good friend Joe Reiling, God rest his soul, had come down from Fresno. And the first day he was in L.A., he turned on the radio and he listened to KROQ, and he heard Rabbit on the air. And Rabbit used to forget how to run the equipment. Because he did come to work at 10 a.m. and didn't go on the air till 2. So he drank for 4 hours before he hit the air. And he caught Rabbit in one of his lapses where he was going F this and F that, and this doesn't work. And Riley said, "Man, I've hit the big time. This is cool. If this is the way LA radio sounds, this is everything it cracked up to be. Yeah, this is cool."
If I'm right, you were kind of an engineer who ended up on the radio, right? Is that
pretty much out of the process of elimination,
right? Because people didn't show up because all the talent were insane and didn't show up.
Or there were no more records to take to errands and get cash for. So,
oh wow, was it that hard getting paid back in the early days?
Yeah,
we only take cleans.
Yeah, there were days.
Yeah, right. Cleans. The opposite of a clean is a cutout.
Yeah,
right. A cutout is a record with a hole in it or the corner cutout, and that means it's a promo.
Paydays were the days where the owners would point at the other guy and go. Talk to him.
What do you think about you go to sometimes to these shows where people are selling records and they've got the record that was given to the disc jockey and it had that strip of paper on there, and the disc jockeys used to talk about which record they liked and why.
3 or 4 cuts or more.
And so if there was a record with a Darrell Wayne comment on it or a Geno Michellini comment on it, it would be worth more than the record would otherwise.
In those days, the way it was done is people thought we played every track on every record. We didn't, even then. But we'd have music meetings where we'd sit around a room like this and maybe you're trying to get inspired.
Yes.
And then we start playing music. And the music department PD would be there. And we'd listen, and everybody would vote on the tracks, and the music director and the PD would have the final say on the cuts. Yeah. Now, sometimes we'd play every cut on the record, sometimes just one if it was only a good track. We had a big sticker on the back with the numbers on each side, which ones you would play. And the rule was if you played a track, you would put your initial, your date, and your time on the track, so the next person would play a different track.
Yes, right.
Yes, and that was the rules.
Guys, I have a theory, and I think maybe you could confirm it for me, or maybe dispel the theory as hokey. When I first started hanging around radio stations, KNAC was the first one, and Bobby Blue
was the first one
on
for
the
me
air
as well.
Really? I used to hang out with Bobby Blue on Saturdays, and inevitably we'd smoke some kind of pot, and he'd tell me to go over and pick a record, and he'd put me on the air, and we'd pontificate about Nostradamus and the possibility that aliens had visited, and then we'd play a song. Anyway, so like you do, and I'm a 17-year-old kid, with an adult in a room by myself, which would never happen again. So that was my introduction to radio. When I got my first job with KLOS and KABC in Los Angeles, this was in 1981. All of the disc jockeys were still smoking something or drinking something in the studio with the general. You remember the general manager's office? What was his name? Summers? Bill Summers. Yeah,
Bill.
Bill.
The studio shared a wall with the general manager's office.
Now.
Yeah,
I used to think he was a hard ass. Right. Now I miss him.
Right.
So
if we could go back to that, how awesome would that be?
Oh my God!
Right?
So the theory is, at some point, all of that stopped, and my theory is it stopped when Los Angeles got the Olympics and Warner Electra Asylum controlled the music industry and Asia and Toto and the Eagles.
What are you smoking
Linda
right
Ronstadt,
now?
Right?
Yeah,
no,
geez.
and that because after the Olympics there was no alcohol, no marijuana, no nothing in any studio anywhere that I could find.
I wouldn't know because before the Olympics, I was in San Francisco, so we were in our own fog.
Wow.
Yeah.
Phil, I hate to tell you, but that went on a little while after the Olympics. For a time, there was still lots of cocaine and hookers. And
I can confess. One morning,
while you're on the air in the studio,
I'm in KLOS, and I was working the Mark and Brian show when Geno was there doing afternoons. And in comes Hoyt Axton as a guest. He's got a pipe and burning a little hash oil, and we just all got fried. That's how that worked.
Yeah.
So my theory, hokey.
Kinda. My very first FM gig was at KSFM in Sacramento, Earth Radio for Northern California. And I'd made the switch from Top 40 because I wanted to do FM.
Is that where you started in Top 40?
I started in Top 40 when I got out of the Air Force. Yeah. And I got the gig because everybody at KSFM had quit. The entire staff had quit and gone to KSJO in San Jose.
Yeah.
And the only guy who stayed behind was a guy named Ken Beck because he realized if I stay behind, I can be boss.
That's how I got on the air.
But they were desperate for jocks. So I right place, right time.
Right.
And so I'm on the air, and I'd been there about a week. and making the transition from top 40 to Cool FM. But my program director called me into his office, and I mean, I didn't know anybody in there yet. I'm still, just making the transition. And he goes, "Do you smoke marijuana?" And I said, and I didn't know where this was leading.
Didn't know what the right answer was.
I didn't know what the right answer exactly. And I'm going, well, look, once in a while I've been known to. He says, do you take downers? And I went, really? Downers? No, he said, I think you should try some because you need to calm down. Oh. He said, you sound like you're on speed. He says, this is not top 40. He said, try something.
Oh my gosh.
That was my boss.
That's hilarious. Well, see, you were a fan of B. Mitchell Reed. He came from top 40 color radio.
That's where I got the name Michellini.
All right. Oh, really? How?
Yeah, that's not my real name.
It's Reed.
At that same station, that same program director came to me.
Yes.
And he told me, by the way, before my first show,
yes,
he says, you can't use your real name because there's a guy across town that has a name very similar to your name.
Yes.
It's too close. You've got to change it. So I've got 15 minutes to come up with a name that's going to last me for the rest of my life.
That's what happened to me.
Yeah.
It was the same thing.
And I'm going like, you go into, oh, sure, calm and cool.
Right?
So I did the only thing I could think of doing. I grabbed a phone book.
Yes.
I dropped it, and it fell open.
Oh,
and I went,
God.
boink.
Yeah.
And it fell open to the middle, the
Yes.
M's.
Right.
Mitchell.
Yes.
And I went, Mitchell? Mitchell?
Mitchell? Yeah.
Gene Mitchell?
Yeah.
And I'm going, wait. B. Mitchell Reed. He's one of your heroes. It's a sign from God.
Yes.
So I became Gene Mitchell, which immediately I went, oh, no. Yeah. What the most boring name in history.
Yes.
Right. I could have been Geno Mayonnaise, and it would have been better.
Too bad it wasn't a cookbook.
Oh, well, so I started, exactly. I started playing with it because I hated it so much, but I was stuck with it. One day I'd be Geno Michellini, one day I was Geno Michelowski, one day I was Geno Michelingus.
Yes, that could be fun.
Should have gone with that one.
And the thing that the ratings started coming in, and you have the thing at the back of the Arbitron called the mechanicals, where they write notes.
That's right. People write things.
And people were writing down, we like this Geno Michellini, and nobody had ever mentioned Gene Mitchell.
Yes.
Right. So that's how it became.
Wow.
Yeah, that's awesome.
It sticks. Well, good for you. Yeah.
Mr. Wayne.
Yes, sir.
Can you talk to me about the transition of KROQ, which was in the late 70s, 78, 79, there were 8 rock stations in L.A. There was KMET, there was K-West, there was KLOS, and KROQ was part of it.
Kind of.
Right, and so they were all kind of in the same lane. So at some point, things changed, and Rick Carroll came in while you were at KROQ.
Correct.
And kind of changed things. And that was kind of a historic moment, right? And you were there then.
I was there before and after.
Right.
It was somewhat my fault because Pat Welsh, who was the general manager, was a assistant to Ken Roberts. Ken and Pat had gone to high school together in Hoboken, New Jersey, and had produced and were business managers for Jay and the Americans, Sly and the Family Stone, Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons, and some pretty impressive Johnny Mathis. Others.
Right.
And Pat was also a member of the Riviera Country Club and golfed every weekend with the general manager of K-Earth and KLOS and things like that. Right. And we were starting to make some marks in the marketplace. We were starting to get some ratings, and people were paying attention to us, and we were still freeform. I was program director, Jed was music director, and Shadow Stevens was our consultant.
So Jed the Fish, right? Yeah. And Shadow Stevens, who went on to be famous for his...
Well, he was famous from before.
Federated commercials, but...
For many things, Hollywood Squares and Dave's World and a lot of things. And he was my consultant.
American Top 40 with Casey.
Yep. And Pat would golf, and they'd say, well, Pat, what's your format? And Pat would come to me and said, Darrell, what's our format? And I'd say, Pat, our format is we have no format.
That sounds familiar.
Yeah.
And so he would go back the next week, and they said, well, Pat, what's your format? He says, we have no format. And they said, well, you have to have a format. What's your hot clock look like?
Uh-oh.
Whoa. What?
Uh-oh.
And he'd come back and say, well, what's our hot clock look like? And I said, we don't have one.
Yeah.
So he'd go back and he'd say, we don't have one. They said, well, you have to have a hot clock.
You can't have a format.
Can't have a format without a hot clock.
Yeah.
So he'd come back to me and said, we'll make a hot clock. And I said, no.
Oh.
I said, we have an understanding with the people on the air. We balance new with old, familiar with unfamiliar. The records in the control room are watercolors, and we paint pictures and we tell stories.
Yes.
You got that one too?
Yeah.
I got that exact same story from Michael.
And he said, well, we have to have a hot clock. And I said, no. I'm 23, 24 years old. I'm full of piss and vinegar. We were the last bastion of freeform radio in the country in L.A., and we were doing pretty well. And all the record people loved us because they could get our song played immediately without having to work their way up to the majors through the medium and small markets.
Through the consultants?
Yeah, we had entire record labels that were formed just to service KROQ. IRS Records, Sire Records, Island Records.
Oh, yeah.
And so he says, well, I'm going to find somebody that will. I said, go ahead. See if you could get somebody that worked for the same kind of money that we will.
Yeah.
That'll come in and program the radio station. Hence, Rick Carroll showed up.
Oh.
And Geno was talking about the music meetings. We had just had a music meeting the day before, and it was a complete democracy. I mean, Jed and I were music and program director, but we all smoked and voted.
Yeah, exactly.
Smoke and vote.
You're not to interject, but you just triggered a memory. One of Michael's inspirational messages to us. One of our staff meetings when we're doing listening to the music and so forth, and he would get rolling, and he gave us the same analogy. I want you to think of that 4 hours you're on the air as a blank canvas. And when you're an artist painting that picture, I want you to use every color in the rainbow. Do you get what I'm trying to tell you? Wow. And we're going, I think he's trying to tell us to listen to more music. Okay.
Yeah.
So Jed and I were introduced to Rick Carroll and Larry Groves. Larry was his music director for those many years. And we were sitting in the music library in the back of the building, and we had just had our music meeting, and we had just done our ads. And Jed held up an Elvis Costello album to Rick Carroll, said, are we going to play this going forward? And Rick said, oh, no, we're not going to play that. He held up a Devo album. We're going to play this. No, we're not going to play that. He held up a Talking Heads album. We're going to play this. Oh, no, we're not going to play that. And Rick went straight after KLOS with Leonard Skinner, Led Zeppelin, Rolling Stones, Beatles, directly after them.
Wow. That's mind-blowing.
For about a month or two.
Really?
A month or two.
Right.
But the record business went nuts.
Kind of like that Coke Light experiment didn't work.
Yeah.
Right, yeah. Yep.
John Scott and some of the other record promoters took out full-page ads in the trade saying boycott KROQ.
Oh, wow.
Because they're not supporting us anymore with all this new music.
Right.
And Rick reverted and applied he had never worked at a rock radio station. He had done top 40.
He was a top 40 guy, right?
He did KKDJ, he had done KZY, and so he applied his top 40 rotation to the new wave records.
Now, what year are you talking about, Darrell?
Late 79, early 80.
Yeah, 79, yeah.
Rock of the 80s.
Right.
Yep.
And that's where that format was born.
Yeah.
So he brought the music that we were playing back in and put it on rotation.
I'll take you to the next step now. You started it. This is at KLOS now, and it was one of my 5 program directors, and it had gotten to the point where now it was the hot track. And I had the show Power Cuts, and sadly, that's what they were calling them, Power Cuts. And the record company would dictate to you, we're going to give you the album, but this is the track we want you to play.
Yeah, they would pick.
And then we will decide what the next track, the emphasis track, will be, and then you will play that track. Right. And we had a program director, Charlie West.
Yeah.
And I recall it was the Aerosmith album. And we were playing Dude Looks Like a Lady or whatever the track was they wanted to play. But they had a version of the Beatles, I'm Down. Okay. And we liked it. We played it, and we got great phone response for it. And we wanted to play it. We wanted to report it. And the record company said, no, we don't want you to report that. And we're going to play this record because our audience likes it, and you don't stop doing that. And they said, well, if you keep doing that, we're going to withdraw the advertising on the Aerosmith concert and the concert tickets. And the tail started wagging the dog.
That's right.
That's kind of where. That's all kind of where it began. So, to briefly reset, we are live from the LA Radio Studio.
Yay.
.com. Mm-hmm. Thanks for being with us. Hashtag LARadiostudio.com. How are you doing there, Mike Stark? Everything good?
This has just been a wonderful day so far.
Isn't this awesome?
This is just awesome.
All right, this is Super Radio Geek Talk, but if you listen to the radio in the late 70s, 80s, and 90s, this is, I think interesting.
L.A. radio.
But my radio geek was fulfilled because I was born and raised in L.A. I was born in Linwood, California.
Right.
Same as Weird Al, who's a who's a close friend.
All right.
But, this business has afforded me the opportunity to learn, meet, and work with a lot of my radio idols. Right. Jimmy Rabbit, Shadow Stevens, Stephen Clean.
Oh, yes.
Wow,
Damien.
I hear you.
And,
the obscene Stephen Clean.
Yes, of course.
I had one of those
That's where my name came from.
Oh,
right.
The insane Darrell Wayne, the obscene Stephen Clean.
Stephen and Frasier and I were in the control room, and Frasier said, if he's the obscene Stephen Clean, you must be the insane Darrell Wayne. And I took it, and I used it, and I ran with it.
All right.
What a great story.
All right, hold on. Mr. Insane Darrell Wayne.
Yes.
I'm a huge Fraser Smith fan.
Yes.
I'm friends with him.
I got a chance to fire him.
I was going to ask you about that. Tell me the firing Fraser Smith story.
There was a magazine called LA Magazine, and they did an interview with Fraser Smith about his budding comedy career. I mean, when I met him, he was plain old. He wasn't even Fraser Smith. He was Doug Smith from Detroit.
Okay.
And he was working at KROQ on the weekends and washing airplanes at LAX during the week. And he started to play this character on the air, Fraser Smith. Beat me, write me, make me write bad checks.
Yes, right.
The man so mean, the man so clean. They had to call him Fraser, the master blaster, the boss with a hot sauce.
Cool Patrol.
Right, Cool Patrol.
Right, yeah.
And I did 2 to 7 on Saturdays, and he did 7 to midnight. And my theme was "You're Insane" by Rod Stewart, and he was "Panic in Detroit." And I would roll "Panic in Detroit," and I'd get out of the way because he would come in, he would smash beer bottles, he would break furniture, he would yell, he would scream. And he really did that. It wasn't sound effects.
Wow.
That was real.
And he started to live that character outside the control room.
Oh, boy.
He started to get his finger in your chest. Do you know who I am, man? I'm Fraser Smith.
Oh, boy.
And he did this interview for LA Magazine, and he said that KROQ was a stepping stone that he was using in his career to better himself and
Which is where Jerry Weintraub came in the picture.
And Ken Roberts read that over his cup of coffee on a Saturday morning, and he called me and said, "Tell him to step."
Yeah. All right, so can we cross over now over to KLOS
But the fact is that Fraser didn't have a place to live at the time and didn't have a telephone. So I was not able to call him up and fire him or ask him to come in to fire him. And he was only on Saturday, so I had a week to find him. To let him go. And I set the trap lines and I couldn't find him, so by Thursday I changed the liners in the control room to Saturday night 7 p.m. It's Dusty Street.
Oh.
And he heard it and he went nuts. And we probably didn't speak for about 6 months.
I can imagine.
I was hosting a Jamie James and the King Bees concert at the Whiskey, and he dumped a pitcher of beer over my head.
Wow.
And then we did meet up about a year later, and he said some nice things. We made up.
Are you guys okay now?
Yeah, we're fine. I've hired him to do a couple of things for me since, and we've broken bread and spent some time, and
that's good.
Wow.
All right, now
we love each other again.
So now over at the KLOS times, were you there while Phrase was there?
No, Phrase, like I said earlier.
I never worked for KLOS or KMET.
No, I know. I was talking to Geno. I was talking to Geno about KLOS.
My turn now.
Right, because
were you there when he threw his award in the trash?
Well, here's my story as a DJ. I moved to LA in 1978, and Phrase was on KLOS.
Maybe not that early. I think it was more like 81,
79, 80. He's doing mornings on KLOS.
I came down to KLOS in 84.
Okay,
I started in 81 there.
And Shauna was doing mornings when I joined them. Phrase had just been fired.
Yeah.
Right.
And the reason that they told me he had been fired there was because he'd come up for contract renewal. He just had the biggest morning book in town.
Right.
But as he said,
Right.
The head was a little large.
Can we get Fraser on the... Somebody get Fraser on the phone. Get Fraser on the phone.
What I was told was he got Jerry Weintraub, the huge producer, to come into town, and he walked in to represent Fraser for the new contract.
Right.
And Bill Summers said, "Oh no, I ain't taking this," and we don't need him that badly. And that was it. That was the end of it.
Wow. I love all of you guys. You're such a tapestry of LA radio in that.
And at one of the greatest times in history of radio, period.
Right.
Yeah.
And
West Coast radio at that time.
It was so weird for me because I had moved from the East Coast. So I had come from WBCN, hey, here's another ELO track. And I came out here to L.A. and Fraser Smith's on the mornings, and I'm on a cruise down the L.A. River, and KROQ they're throwing out, ELO records, and they're playing Devo on this rock station, and it was totally mind-blowing for me, and this was right at that point in my high school growing up that you guys, both of you two, sitting here right now in front of me,
amazing,
totally changed my life. So
it's puberty.
Look at
yeah, right. And look how I turned out.
Yeah.
Nothing went wrong. Nothing went wrong here. Nothing went wrong here at all.
No, nothing.
Right. So
awesome.
Good job, guys.
Yeah. Way to go.
But thank you for what you did, and thank you for making amazing radio in Los Angeles.
And you've both been part of LA Radio Studio.
Exactly.
Yeah, over the years, absolutely.
Well, I love this equipment. Looks so damn familiar.
Well, it should.
You've been here before.
When I first came a while back, when Mike and I first reconnected, and I walked in and went, "That's my old board from KLOS. What are you doing?"
I have two of those in storage at the moment.
Right.
Do you?
I played Freebird on this
I can't give them away.
Yeah. Well, at least we know, Mike. We have backups now.
All right. That's good.
If you need parts, we have.
Oh wait, we don't have a studio after today.
We're gonna put the furniture in storage.
All right. So one last question, and then we'll cut you loose. It's been wonderful talking with you, but what's the immediate future of radio, and/or you can answer it that way, or answer it this way: is radio dead?
I'll take it since I own a radio station.
Yes.
It's content. Whoever provides the content, it doesn't matter the delivery system. If you can put together compelling content, whether it be a podcast, whether it be a broadcast, whether it be, delivered to you via Spreaker or whatever the case may be, it is content, and it's compelling radio, and it would keep people's attention. It's stories that have a beginning, a middle, and an end.
Stories.
Yeah, like or hate Howard Stern, my wife and I were listening to him on the... I don't have satellite radio in my car, nor would I, really care to.
Yeah, right.
And we were driving from Joliet, Illinois to the Navy Pier, which is about a half an hour drive. We got to the Navy Pier. We sat in the car for another 15 minutes to listen to Howard Stern finish a bit that he was doing that was vile. It was gross. It was disgusting. It had to do with one of his interns wearing the same pair of underwear for 5 weeks and then wringing it out and drinking the remains, along with a comedian that was on the show with him. I don't remember.
What's that got to do with the future of radio?
Well, what it has to do with
he's just trying to recycle a bit.
At the end,
recycle a bit.
We sat in the car for another 15 minutes to hear the end.
Yeah.
Because we knew that he was going to wrap it up somehow.
You heard the beginning and the middle.
And we waited for the end.
Yeah.
It's content.
And that's time spent listening.
And it doesn't matter how it's delivered. We're just talking about, how you get your drugs.
And that'll compete well with an 8-minute commercial break any day of the week.
Well, that's true.
No, you're absolutely right on target.
Yeah.
Geno, you have a thought?
100%.
Mr. Michellini, your thoughts?
I'll take the other side of that coin. He's speaking from a business perspective. I could care less about that. I'm speaking from a point of view of a career.
Yeah.
I don't see much.
Yeah.
I got into it because it was the greatest job in the world. And our motto used to be, we get paid too. Because it was theater of the mind, it was imagination, it was fun, it was no holds barred. Didn't have to wear a tie to work.
Yeah.
It was you connected with your audience. Now it's product.
Yeah.
And delivering it however you want to deliver it. I think that's the saddest part of the whole thing is, to this day, you say deregulation to a listener, they give you a look like a deer in the headlights. They have no idea what's been done and what's happened. And they also really don't know the difference between what was and what is now. All they know is they turn on the radio and they hear the music, and that's all that matters to them.
Yep.
In the meantime, I'm still trying to figure out why someone would want to get into radio now. And I know that sounds bitter, and I don't mean it that way, because it was the greatest job in the world.
Yeah.
But it's pre-programmed, formatted. You read the card, push the button. The music, there's even turntables with the CD players now. It's all in the computer, and it comes down from a centralized place, sometimes not even in the city that you're broadcasting from.
Yeah,
why would you want to get into radio?
You got to look for that seeping squeak of a vacuum. It's got to be out there somewhere at some
point. From the audience point of view?
And you could sell a concept that has personality and storytelling and start it, and then all the consultants across the country will buy it as their idea and sell it to the stations across the country.
First of all, if you're just a jukebox, you're just a jukebox, but somebody wants to hear the stories of what was happening in between the music.
That's true.
Somebody wants to hear the stories about the concerts, what happened. People want to hear about Altamont, and people want to hear about Monterey, and people want to hear about the great festivals, and people want to hear about the archaeological dig they're doing right now for Woodstock for the anniversary coming up. People want to hear that.
Yeah.
And what amazes me, and somebody can run to the bank with this, or maybe not, because probably nobody will do it. Why aren't any of the LA talk stations having an hour or two or three of talk about rock and roll?
Yeah.
Why not?
With callers to tell stories. I mean, what a great
You're absolutely right.
What great programming that would make.
I can answer that. I was at KFI for a year, and I did talk there, thanks to Dave Hall, who wanted to take a chance. He liked my show.
David G. Hall.
Yeah, really, really good guy. And he said, I always liked where you were coming from on the air, so we try to do it with, and I don't know much about politics, but, take a perspective. The thing was, if you want to talk about rock and roll, do it. The trouble was, we're talking about rock and roll, but we couldn't play rock and roll. I want to hear the music. As my old boss used to say to me when I'm doing interviews, if you don't have anything to say, play a record.
Yeah. Geno Michellini, the insane Darrell Wayne. Just an honor and a pleasure to have you in the studio at the same time. Oh, my gosh. Right here at LA Radio Studio on the final broadcast.
Just a real honor, Darrell.
Thank you.
Thanks
guys.
so much. Geno, good to see you after 20 years.
We're gonna
You look good.
good for nothing.